Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Israel Brief, brought to you by Lay of the Land with myself, Rolene Marks, bringing you those top stories from Israel. And today is a fantastic day in Israel and throughout the region. Today we mark the first anniversary of the official signing of the Abraham Accords, which took place on the lawns of the White House in Washington, D.C. today, a year ago, between Israel, the United States, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates. And it truly has been an extraordinary year, despite the background of the global pandemic. These normalization deals have brought a tremendous amount of cooperation to the countries concerned, with trade between Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain really at extraordinary levels. And not a day goes past without news of yet another memorandum of understanding signed between an industry or a business in Israel and their counterparts in the UAE and Bahrain. And we are hoping that this will be echoed with our other partners as part of the Abraham Accords, Morocco and the Sudan. And of course, we look forward to expanding our circle of peace. But what has gone on in the past year? So much interaction, both on a personal level and on a business level. And while it is the politicians, the diplomats that sign the agreements, it is really the people on the ground that forge the peace. And we have seen this echoed on social media and with the interactions face to face, now that we can travel to each other's countries, between Israelis and Bahrainis and Emiratis. We have seen extraordinary events like the group Sharaka visiting Israel, learning about the Israeli narrative, learning about Jewish history with visits to places like Yad Vashem. We have seen delegation after delegation, in fact in record numbers, traveling to Dubai and Abu Dhabi to discover what the United Arab Emirates has in store for us. Next month, we look forward to direct flights between Israel and Bahrain, and we are sure that an incredible amount of tourism will take place between the two countries. We have seen the growth of the Association of Jewish Gulf Communities, which includes communities from Oman and Saudi Arabia joining countries like Israel and the UAE and Bahrain. We have seen the opening of embassies of the United Arab Emirates in Tel Aviv, and likewise Israel in Abu Dhabi and in Dubai. Today, the ambassador of Bahrain to Israel, Ambassador Jalahma, will present his credentials to our President Herzog. Now, this was unimaginable just over a year ago, but here we sit with this extraordinary anniversary. And has it been tested? Yes, of course it has been. You know, we were watching with bated breath to see what would happen in May when the escalation took place between Israel and our neighbors, Gaza, when Hamas fired barrage after barrage of rockets into Israel, causing Israel to respond and attack targets within the Gaza Strip. But these accords held steady. They proved that they've got legs of their own, and even though we might from time to time have conflagration with our neighbors, they stand the test of time and will only get stronger. And to prove this point, if you are on the Ayalon Highway today driving towards Tel Aviv, there are extraordinary billboards sponsored by the Embassy of the United Arab Emirates in Israel saying peace is the future of our children. And that is a sentiment we echo. So Mazal Tov, Mabruk to Israel, to the United Arab Emirates, to Bahrain on this extraordinary first anniversary. And a huge thank you and acknowledgement to the United States for their role in ensuring that this kind of peace is brokered. Now, yesterday we told you that our Prime Minister Naftali Bennett was visiting with President Sisi from Egypt in Sharm el-Sheikh. This is the first time in a decade that an Israeli premier has been in Egypt, and the meeting went extraordinarily well, with Naftali Bennett quoted as saying, "We have formed a deep and lasting peace." And as of next month, we will see direct flights between Cairo and Tel Aviv, which just goes to show that maybe our Egyptian partners are looking at what has transpired between Israel and her Abraham Accords family and are saying, maybe we want a piece of that too. In other news, the public security minister has warned that there could perhaps be an escalation of violence in Israel. To brace for this, 2,000 troops have been deployed in Jerusalem, and this follows a terror attack yesterday where two youths were stabbed by a Palestinian terrorist who was neutralized. He was not killed. He is in stable condition in a hospital, and it also follows an attempted terror attack at the Gush Etzion junction earlier yesterday. Now, this comes as Israel has recaptured 4 out of the 6 prison escapees, and we've seen the response from terror groups within the Palestinian territories who have fired rocket attacks, and we are bracing for an uptick in violence in solidarity with we'll call them the formerly escaped prisoners. There are still 2 prisoners at large. However, we are confident that we will catch them and that the net is closing in. In other news, an Israeli district court ruled today that Hamas has to pay the families of the 3 kidnapped and murdered youths, Naftali Frankel, Eyal Yefrach and Gilad Sha'ar, some 38 million shekels. Now, the legal entity or the legal group that put forward the court case says that this sum is not enough, that it is not enough of a sum to deter terrorism. And this follows the horrendous events that occurred around the kidnap and murder of these 3 young men who were kidnapped in 2014 at a hitchhiking outpost and murdered shortly after. However, the search for their bodies or for any signs of what we hoped at the time would be life, but unfortunately knew what the end result was in due course when they were in fact found after 18 days. It was also an event that precipitated the 2014 war between Israel and Hamas and terror entities within the Gaza Strip, known as Operation Protective Edge or Operation or Mivtza Tzuk Eitan, as it is called in Hebrew. It took some 50 days, but we credit these 3 youths who paid the ultimate sacrifice with alerting the Israeli security services to the fact that Hamas and terror entities were trying to tunnel into Israel to kidnap more civilians or more soldiers or commit horrendous acts of terror. Our thoughts and our prayers continue to be with their families. They have endured the absolute unimaginable, and our prayers are that their memories are for a blessing and that they are able to rest in peace. And our final story takes us to something very, very important, and that is Israel is approaching Yom Kippur. Israel and Jews around the world will start to mark Yom Kippur from sunset tomorrow night as we mark Kol Nidra, which is the opening service of Yom Kippur, and the fast on the Day of Atonement, which will take place until sunset the following day. Now, Lay of the Land will be offline. There will be no activity from us until Yom Kippur is over, so we won't be broadcasting tomorrow in order to make preparations for this. This is a day that Israel comes to a complete standstill. There will not be TV broadcast. What you will see in the streets is not a single car in sight, but children taking to the streets on their bicycles or on their roller skates and skateboards. It is a day of deep contemplation, deep reflection, a day where we take what we call our cheshbon nefesh. We take an account of our souls, of our actions over the past year, and atone for any transgressions or any sins. So this gives me the opportunity for all of us on behalf of Lay of the Land to ask you for forgiveness if there is anything that we have done to offend or to hurt anybody's feelings out there, and for us to forgive anybody who has done the same to us. And all that remains for me is, on behalf of the team at Lay of the Land, to wish you Gemar Chatima Tova. May you be inscribed in the book of life. And if you are fasting, may you have a meaningful and peaceful fast. But if you are not fasting, and if you are missing content, and if you do want something to do, please look no further than our website at www.layoftheland.online. You can read all our content that's up there. You can also check out our Facebook page. We would love it if you helped grow our community by liking us or following us. And if you are watching this, please share our content. We are often censored because we bring you news that Facebook censors maybe do not like or agree with. If you are viewing us on YouTube right now, please like, share, and subscribe. Please help us get our news from Israel out to as many people as possible by clicking on the subscribe button. And if you're on Twitter, please follow us at Lay of the Land 5. I'm Rolene Marks. I wish you all a meaningful Yom Kippur, and we'll catch up with you for another edition of the Israel Brief on Monday.